A small-town waitress vanishes during a Kansas thunderstorm, her car and the bridge turnout swallowed by rain and silence. For decades, her family keeps the porch light burning, convinced the storm didn't take her. Someone did. Then, during a summer drought, the receding waters of an abandoned quarry reveal a car sealed in silt, a cassette labeled with a hymn, and a truth too deliberate to be an accident. The man who comforted the grieving for 34 years is suddenly the suspect, his familiar voice echoing on the tape found beside her remains. As the evidence unfolds, a community built on faith turns against itself, realizing the wolf wore their shepherd's smile. When justice finally comes, it leaves behind a haunting question. How many others did the storm help him hide? Through sheets of rain, the payphone's dim light casts a weak halo on the bridge turnout. Inside the booth, the 19-year-old waitress cradles the heavy receiver, her other hand pressed against the glass to steady herself as thunder rolls closer. Her mother's voice crackles through the line, familiar and worried. "Baby, you shouldn't be out there in this weather. Those gravel roads flood so quick." "I know, Mama, I'm just checking in like I promised. The diner was slow tonight, but I made enough to cover Dad's medicine copay." She shifts, watching. Headlights sweep past on US 50, the occasional semi-truck's passage making the phone booth shudder. Her pale blue Ford Tempo sits 20 feet away, hazard lights pulsing orange in the gathering storm. The lights catch raindrops like falling sparks, each flash illuminating the empty stretch of shoulder beside the Neosho River Bridge. "Did you get your study group sorted out for tomorrow?" her mother asks, the connection starting to scratch with static as the storm builds. "Yeah, Sarah's picking me up at—" She stops mid-sentence, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. Another vehicle has pulled onto the shoulder, its headlights off. A door opens and closes. A massive thunderclap drowns everything for 3 seconds. When it fades, she presses the receiver tighter to her ear, trying to hear her mother's voice through the growing interference. "Mama, you still there? Breaking up. Honey, you say someone's giving you a ride?" A tall figure steps out of the darkness, moving with purpose toward the phone booth. Something about the stride makes her pulse quicken. Through the storm static, her mother's voice grows more concerned. "Baby? Answer me. Who's there with you?" The figure is closer now, almost at the booth. Recognition hits her like ice water. Her fingers tighten on the receiver as another lightning flash illuminates the face outside the glass. "Oh," she says softly, the word almost lost in the storm. "It's—" Thunder cracks overhead like artillery fire. The phone line erupts in static, then goes dead. The dial tone hums, flat and final, as rain hammers the metal roof of the booth. On the other end of the disconnected call, her mother stands in their kitchen, still holding the receiver, listening to nothing. The clock on the wall reads 12:19 a.m. Outside her window, the storm that will flood the gravel roads is just beginning to break over Emporia. Back at the bridge turnout, an 18-wheeler thunders past, its driver squinting through the downpour. His headlights sweep across the shoulder, a pale blue sedan with hazard lights still blinking. A phone booth with its door swinging open, and 2 figures, one tall, one small, visible for just a moment before the darkness and rain swallow everything again. By the time the sun rises over the Neosho River, the shoulder will be empty. No skid marks will mar the wet pavement. The phone booth will stand silent, its receiver swaying gently in the morning breeze. And in the diner's parking lot, a single marked patrol car will idle, its deputy trying to find the right words to tell her mother that sometimes people and cars just vanish, swallowed by storms and rivers and darkness that keeps its secrets. Dawn breaks pale and watery over Lyon County. The storm has left the gravel roads slick with mud, dotted with pools that mirror the gray Kansas sky. In the passenger seat of her neighbor's pickup, Linda Matthews, the missing girl's mother, presses her hand against the cold window, scanning each turnout and shoulder. Her 2 younger children, Amy and David, crowd the back seat, their faces drawn with a worry too adult for 13 and 11. "There," Amy points through fog-streaked glass, "another pullout." The truck slows, tires crunching on wet gravel. Nothing but puddles and scattered branches from the storm. Linda makes another mark on her gas station map, already crowded with X's where they've looked. Back at the modest family home on Oak Street, Tom Matthews sits at the kitchen phone, his back brace creaking as he leans forward. The cordless receiver has grown warm against his ear from hours of calls, to the sheriff's office, to the church prayer chain, to anyone with a boat who might help search the swollen Neo show. "She's responsible," he tells the sheriff's dispatcher for the third time, voice rough with worry. "Never missed work, never stayed out. Something's wrong." By 9 a.m., a collection of John boats and fishing skiffs launches from the old concrete ramp south of the bridge. Volunteers in orange life, vests drag hooks through the murky current, pulling up waterlogged tree limbs and tangles of river grass. Each snag brings a moment of held breath, then relief mixed with frustration when it yields nothing more. At the Quick Shop on Commercial Street, a young clerk sorts through last night's receipts, finding one time-stamped 11:56 p.m. A small fuel purchase paid in cash. She remembers the girl, remembers the pale blue tempo, but when Deputy Harris copies it down, distracted by his crackling radio, he writes 11:51. The slip goes into a manila folder marked Missing Person Matthews, but somehow slides behind a stack of speeding tickets. The 5-minute difference, tiny but crucial, vanishes into bureaucratic limbo. Evening finds the family at their scratched kitchen table, the surface crowded with casserole dishes brought by concerned neighbors. The church's music minister, Brother James, sits with them, his usually commanding voice soft with emotion. "We'll organize meals," he says, reaching for Linda's hand, "and rides for the children, to school, to practice, whatever you need." His prayer, when it comes, trembles just enough to draw tears from the TV news crew filming through the screen door. But after the cameras leave, his questions turn specific. Which routes did she prefer in bad weather? Did she ever mention alternate ways, home? He notes each answer in a small leather notebook, his pen moving quickly across the page. Night settles over Emporia like a heavy blanket. Up and down Oak Street, porch lights wink on, a constellation of artificial stars burning against the darkness. In the Matthews driveway, the empty space where the tempo should be seems to grow larger with each passing hour. Linda stands at the kitchen window, watching moths circle their own porch light. Behind her, Amy and David have finally fallen asleep on the couch, homework abandoned. Tom dozes in his recliner, pain medication and worry drawing lines around his mouth. The wall clock reads 11:56, exactly 24 hours since that miscopied gas station receipt, its crucial timeline already buried in a filing cabinet at the sheriff's office, waiting years to be discovered. Morning light filters through the sheriff's office windows, casting long shadows across worn linoleum. Deputies gather around a coffee-stained map, marking the previous night's search zones with red pins. Detective Morgan shifts in his creaking chair, notepad open as he interviews Sarah Chen, another waitress from the diner. "Brother James was always around late," Sarah says, fidgeting with her uniform collar. "Said it wasn't right for girls to drive those back roads alone when they flood. He'd follow some of us, home in his Buick, just to be safe." She pauses, glancing at the ceiling tiles. Must have given her at least 3 rides this summer when the creeks were high. The music minister sits in the next room, his posture relaxed despite the early hour. His silver-streaked hair is neatly combed, his shirt pressed crisp despite yesterday's searching. He offers a timeline without prompting, each detail laid out like sheet music. "I left the church at 11:30, stopped for gas at the Shell on 6th, you can check their cameras, then drove straight home via Merchant Street. The rain wasn't bad yet, just starting really. Got in around midnight, called my wife in Topeka to say goodnight." His smile is gentle, concerned. "I wish I'd known she was working late. I would have offered a ride, of course." Detective Morgan notes how the minister's account flows too smooth, like rehearsed piano scales, but there's nothing concrete to challenge. No one notices that weather radar showed the heaviest rain bands hitting Merchant Street by 11:45, when the minister claims it was barely sprinkling. By mid-morning, a new thread emerges. A convenience store clerk mentions overhearing something about heading to Wichita. The game of telephone transforms this fragment into certainty. She must have run off with some boyfriend no one knew about. 2 patrol. Cars speed west along Highway 50, burning precious hours checking motels and bus stations, while the Neo show rises another foot. The muddy current erases evidence along the bridge turnout. Tire tracks blur into brown smears. The payphone stands silent, its metal skin beaded with moisture. Sunday arrives with humid weight, Light through stained glass throws colored shadows across pews as Brother James settles at the piano. His fingers find the opening notes of Amazing Grace, her favorite, he tells the congregation, voice thick with emotion. Tissue boxes circulate as he plays, his shoulders trembling visibly. But Linda Matthews, seated in the third row, sees something else. Each time the minister's gaze sweeps the sanctuary, it skips over her face like a stone across water, never landing, never holding. The performance feels just slightly off-key to her mother's instincts, though she couldn't say exactly why. After the final hymn, the fellowship hall fills with casserole steam and murmured prayers. Brother James moves efficiently through the crowd, transferring leftovers into Tupperware with practiced hands. No one watches as he carries the stack of containers to his car, trunk open wide in the deepening dusk. The sunset paints Emporia's streets in shades of blue and purple as his Buick pulls away, tail lights diminishing to red points before vanishing around the corner. In his rearview mirror, the church spire stands dark against the evening sky, its shadow stretching long across empty parking spaces where parishioners' cars had been. The search spreads like ripples in still water by Wednesday morning. Pickup trucks and farm vehicles dot the prairie landscape, their occupants scanning ditches and fence rows through binoculars. The late September sun beats down on volunteers walking the gridded sections, their boots crushing yellowed grass as they push east toward the old quarry belt. Sheriff Wilson unfolds a county map across his cruiser's hood at the command post, the paper fluttering in the hot breeze. Red X's mark cleared areas. Question marks hover over the quarries. Dale Henderson, whose family has worked those chalk pits for 3 generations, shakes his head firmly. Gates were locked and chained. That night, Dale says, tapping the map, always are, got valuable equipment out there, can't risk theft. His weathered face brooks no argument. Storm or no storm, nobody got in. The sheriff nods, drawing a thick black line through the quarry section. The decision ripples through search teams, resources redirected, paths untaken. No one questions the landowner's certainty. In farm country, property lines carry weight. Along a minimum maintenance road, Mary Fletcher waves down Deputy Roberts's patrol car. The retired schoolteacher points to fresh tire tracks cutting through dried mud near a cattle gate. These weren't here yesterday, she insists, squinting in the harsh light. Look how deep they are, heavier than a ranch truck. Roberts studies the ruts half-heartedly, already shaking his head. Probably just the Wilson boys moving their herd before the next rain. He makes no notes, takes no photos. The tracks will wash away in tomorrow's forecast storms, becoming another dead end in a week full of them. Down at the river, volunteers wade chest deep, prodding the muddy bottom with borrowed poles. The current tugs at their safety lines while others work the banks with grappling hooks. Each snag brings a moment of tension before revealing only branches and flood debris. By afternoon, they've recovered nothing but a cracked Coleman cooler lid and a rusted Pennzoil can. Linda Matthews parks her station wagon outside the red brick church, gathering courage before approaching the office door. The hallway smells of fresh coffee and furniture polish, normal, everyday scents that now feel wrong somehow. Brother James answers her knock with that same gentle smile that's been all over the local news. "Have you remembered anything?" she asks. "Any detail about that night? Did you see her car anywhere?" His hands engulf hers, holding too tight, too long. "Oh, Linda, if only I'd known she was working late." The guilt weighs so heavy. His eyes shine with practiced concern. "But I'm afraid I have to step away for a while. The bishops asked me to help Sister Parish in Wichita. Just temporary, you understand, the strain of all this." That evening, the Matthews family drives their worn path along US 50 again. Their headlights sweep the shoulder where their daughter's car last stood, each pass hoping to reveal something new. The gas gauge needle dips toward empty, forcing them to turn back. In their front yard, John Matthews stands before the flagpole, the rope creaking softly in his grip. Without a word to his watching family, he lowers Old Glory to half-staff. The flag catches the last light, its colors muted like a fading photograph. He doesn't explain the gesture, doesn't need to. Some truths speak clearest in silence. The afternoon sun hangs like a dull penny in a hazy October sky as Sheriff Wilson adjusts his tie, standing before a cluster of microphones on the courthouse steps. Local reporters shuffle their notepads, pens hovering. 10 days of searching have etched new lines around the sheriff's eyes. Based on current evidence and weather conditions that night, we're treating this as a likely water event, he announces, his voice carrying across the municipal parking lot. The storm brought flash flooding. The river rose 6 feet by morning. We ask for the community's continued patience as we explore all possibilities. In her kitchen, Linda Matthews grips the counter's edge as the radio carries his words. Water event. The phrase hits her stomach like ice. She remembers teaching her daughter to swim at the tie those small hands clinging to the pool edge, that solemn promise never to go near deep water alone. The girl who triple-checked her tires before rain, who drove exactly 5 miles under the limit on wet roads. The metal taste fills her mouth again, that same copper penny flavor that came when they first called her missing. She switches off the radio, unable to hear more about patience and probability. The silence feels heavier than words. A cream-colored envelope arrives that afternoon, postmarked from Lyon County. Brother James's careful handwriting flows across the paper in blue ink. "Keeping your family in my prayers during this difficult time," it reads. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." A pressed violet falls from the fold, pale purple flattened to tissue-thin perfection. Linda sets the card face down by the kitchen phone without reading the rest, the flower curling slightly at its edges. The church secretary confirms it later that week. Brother James has accepted a temporary position at Grace Baptist, 40 miles south. "Such a difficult time for everyone," she clucks, arranging fresh flowers in the foyer. "He was so broken up about it all." The calendar moves without mercy. Casseroles stop appearing on the porch. The search command post at the fairgrounds is dismantled, folding tables stacked away for next year's 4-H shows. Combines crawl across autumn fields, volunteers returning to their real lives as harvest demands attention. Hope becomes something brittle, held together by the simple mechanics of survival. Getting the younger kids to school, covering shifts at work, keeping the porch light burning against darkness. Linda stands in the kitchen one windless evening, staring at the silent phone. The truth she's been avoiding settles around her like dust. Her daughter, her bright, careful, loving girl, may never come home. No more Sunday dinners. No more borrowed lipstick, no more future to plan. The reality of it catches in her throat. The wall calendar hangs accusingly, still showing September's dates. Linda reaches up with hands that tremble despite her efforts to steady them. She tears away the page, revealing October's grid of empty squares. Each blank date stares back at her, waiting to be filled with nothing but absence. Through the window, she watches her husband check the porch light bulb again, testing its connection like a worry stone. Some rituals are all they have left to hold on to, even if they illuminate nothing but shadows. The seasons blur like watercolors left in rain. Autumn's gold bleeds into winter white, then spring green, over and over until the Matthews kids outgrow their church clothes. In the living room, school pictures march across the wall. Tommy getting his braces, Sarah making varsity volleyball. Between their frames hangs a fading senior portrait from 1988, a girl, forever 19, smiling in a blue sweater that matched her eyes. The father's back deteriorates with each passing season. Doctor visits multiply like the prescription bottles on his nightstand. He can't lift the boxes of missing person flyers anymore, so Linda does it herself, replacing sun-bleached papers on community boards with fresh ones. The image never changes, that same senior photo, that same hopeful smile. The stapler's sharp click echoes through empty parking lots as she works, a sound like tiny gunshots in the dawn quiet. The kitchen pantry becomes a shrine of newsprint and Xeroxed faces. When well-meaning friends suggest taking them down to move forward, Linda only adds more, layering them like wallpaper. Removing even one feels like erasing her daughter piece by piece. Brother James flourishes in his new parish. His name appears in regional church bulletins, leading youth choir, organizing mission trips, running workshops on healing through faith for families touched by tragedy. Each spring he returns to Emporia like a carefully timed migration, offering to help those still struggling with loss. Linda declines every invitation, choosing instead to polish the spare car keys she keeps in a ceramic dish by the front door. The metal warms under her touch, as she imagines her daughter's fingers wrapped around them, coming home. The calendar in Linda's kitchen marks time differently now. Thanksgiving becomes first holiday without her. Christmas is 1st December 25th empty. By the third year, the labels grow shorter. 3rd Easter, 4th July, but the EE, weight behind them never lessens. Tommy graduates high school. Sarah gets accepted to Kansas State. Their achievements cast shadows shaped like their sister's absence. In 1995, Deputy Hanson wheels a dolly into the sheriff's records room. He lifts a cardboard box labeled Matthews A. Missing Person 1988 from its eye-level shelf. With practiced efficiency, he slides it onto a lower rack near the floor, where other unsolved cases gather dust. The motion takes less than 30 seconds, a quiet demotion from active to cold that no one mentions to the family. That same week, storm clouds mass over the Neosho River like bruises. Linda drives the familiar route to the bridge turnout, parking where her daughter's car was last seen. The wind rocks her sedan, pushing whitecaps against the concrete supports below. She rolls down her window, letting the wet air fill her lungs. "I won't stop," she says to the rushing water, to the empty shoulder, to the daughter who exists now only in pictures and memory. Even if they pack away your file, even if they forget to say your name at church suppers, even if they paint over your poster spots downtown, her voice grows stronger against the wind. "I won't stop looking. I won't stop knowing you're out there somewhere. I won't stop being your mother." The river offers no answer, but Linda doesn't need one. She starts her car and heads home to make dinner, to check the porch light, to keep the vigil that others have abandoned. Tomorrow she'll replace another faded poster, polish another set of keys, guard another wall of memories that others might call grief, but she knows is love, crystallized by time into something unbreakable. The internet arrives in Emporia like a slow tide, washing up new theories with each dial-up connection. In 2003, a message board thread titled "Kansas River Girl, What Really Happened" attracts amateur sleuths from across the country. They dissect grainy newspaper scans, debate weather patterns from that September night, and spin elaborate scenarios involving truckers, cults, and underground bunkers. Linda Matthews learns about the online discussion from Tommy, now working IT at the local bank. He shows her the forum on his desktop computer, scrolling through hundreds of posts. Some contributors sound genuinely concerned. Others treat her daughter's disappearance like a puzzle game. Linda reads until her eyes burn, then turns away from the screen. The tips pour in through sheriff's office voicemail. A woman in Topeka swears she saw the blue Tempo parked behind an abandoned gas station. A retired farmer remembers strange lights in his field that storm night. A self-proclaimed psychic from Colorado insists the answers lie in a specific drainage culvert off Highway 50. Deputy Hanson, grayer now but still dedicated, follows up on each lead. He trudges through culverts with a flashlight, examines rusted car parts in ditches, and supervises an excavation when someone convinces the department to dig up a farmer's old trash pit. The mother watches from her car as they sift through decades of buried garbage, finding nothing but broken glass and rusted tin cans. Meanwhile, Brother James builds a new life 50 miles away. The Lyon County Gazette runs a feature on his youth counseling program, complete with color photos showing him comforting teenagers in his office. "Finding light after loss," reads the headline. He's quoted extensively about resilience and healing, words that make Linda's stomach turn. She recycles the newspaper without clipping the article, a first, small act of defiance against her habit of saving everything connected to the case. The sheriff's office struggles to keep up with changing times. While larger departments upgrade to digital systems, Emporia's evidence room remains a maze of manila folders and bankers' boxes. DNA databases expand across state lines, and the FBI's fingerprint system grows more sophisticated, but budget meetings end with shrugs and promises to revisit next fiscal year. The original case file sits in its lower shelf box, its papers turning sepia at the edges, witness statements fading like old photographs. In late August 2003, Linda accepts an invitation from KVOE Radio to record a statement for their Cold Case Spotlight segment. She arrives at the small studio clutching a handwritten note, but sets it aside when the red light blinks on. "My daughter disappeared from the eastbound turnout lane at the Neosho River Bridge," she begins, her voice clear and precise. "It's the first pull-off past the summit where the guardrail curves. There was a payphone there, mounted on a concrete post. She stopped at 11:56 p.m. We know this from a gas station receipt." The phone line was found dangling the next morning. The host starts to interject with a question about theories, but Linda continues, mapping every detail. The shoulder there is exactly 8 feet wide. The phone was 23 steps from the bridge entrance. These aren't estimates. I've measured, I've counted. I want people to understand this isn't legend or rumor. My daughter vanished from a real place that still exists. You can drive there today and see exactly where she stood. Chapter 8, Scene 1. Summer 2012. Bakes Kansas like a clay pot in a kiln. The Neosho River shrinks to a ribbon, exposing sandbars and sun-bleached logs that haven't seen daylight in decades. Farmers watch their ponds shrivel into mud puddles, and old-timers swap stories about the Dust Bowl while eyeing the cracked earth. The drought that starves crops also reveals secrets. Outside Emporia, a series of limestone quarries dot the landscape like pale wounds. Most are abandoned now, their chalk-rimmed pools slowly surrendering water to the relentless sun. On a Saturday morning in July, the Midwest, Missing Persons Project rolls into town, 3 trucks hauling sonar equipment and a film crew documenting cold cases across 5 states. Their leader, Marcus Weber, spreads topographic maps across a folding table at the sheriff's office. These quarries, he taps the paper, were they searched in '88? Deputy Hanson, now a sergeant nearing retirement, shakes his head. Landowner said the gates were locked that night. No signs of tampering. Weber's team follows his finger to an access road leading to the easternmost pit. The new owner, Ted Blackwell, meets them there, a ring of inherited keys jingling in his weathered hands. He's the old man's grandson, took over the property last spring after the funeral. Found something interesting when I was clearing out Grandad's workshop, he says, selecting a rust-pitted key. This was hanging on a nail, labeled Quarry Gate. Never mentioned it to anyone, far as I know. The gate protests with a metallic shriek as decades of corrosion give way. Weber's team backs their sonar boat down the eroded ramp while cameras roll. The drought has dropped the water level by 12 feet, leaving a bathtub ring of pale limestone around the quarry's circumference. The sonar operator, Rachel Chen, studies her monitor as they make methodical passes across the murky surface. Most of the bottom is featureless silt, with occasional tangles of submerged branches. Then, near the deep end, "Contact," she calls out. Solid return, roughly 15 by 6 feet, boxy shape. The dive team suits up while Weber radios the sheriff's office. Underwater visibility is poor, less than 3 feet in the turbid water. The first diver surfaces after 10 minutes, clutching a rectangle of corroded metal. It's a license plate, Kansas issue. The blue paint, barely visible beneath decades of mineral buildup. An evidence technician photographs it, then carefully scrapes away the crust. The numbers emerge like a message from the past, matching the plate registered to the Matthews family's Ford Tempo. The wrecker arrives as shadows stretch across the quarry. Dive teams attach cables, while news vans gather on the access road, their satellite dishes raised like periscopes. Linda Matthews stands apart from the crowd, her hands clasped as if in prayer. With a groan of steel cables, the car breaks the surface. Water cascades from its roof and windows in dirty sheets. The once pale blue paint has aged to a ghostly grey-green, but the Ford badge is still legible on the trunk. Algae streams from the wheel wells as the wrecker slowly winches it onto solid ground. The gathered crowd falls silent. Only the click of camera shutters and the drip of quarry, watermarked time as the Tempo, sealed away for 24 years, returns to the world of air and light. The tow yard's metal halide lights cast harsh shadows across the Ford Tempo's water-stained body. A makeshift evidence processing station emerges under portable canopies as the Kansas Bureau of Investigation's mobile unit arrives. The air hangs thick with diesel exhaust and the quarry's lingering mineral smell. Full documentation before we open it, Special Agent Teresa Martinez directs, her camera clicking methodically. Every scratch, every dent, every angle. The flash illuminates patches of pale blue paint still visible beneath the aquatic patina. Moths swarm the floodlights as technicians in Tyvek suits and nitrile gloves approach the driver's side door. The seal breaks with a wet sucking sound, releasing trapped air that's been held since 1988. Waterlogged upholstery exhales, a wave of stagnant decay. A beige purse slides from the front seat onto the waiting tarp, its leather degraded to the consistency of wet cardboard. Martinez catalogues each item as it emerges. A plastic student ID from Emporia State Community College, the young woman's smile still bright despite water damage. 2 silver hairpins, green with corrosion. A church bulletin, its pages fused together, wrapped protectively around a cassette tape. The hymn. Title remains legible in faded ink. Amazing Grace. "Back seat," calls out Detective Jim Hawkins, his flashlight beam cutting through the murk. A wristwatch lies face up on the floor mat, its crystals spider-webbed with cracks. The hands stand frozen at 12:19, marking the moment time stopped in this tomb of steel and glass. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Helen Chang, leans in with her camera, documenting the skeletal remains. "Note these marks." She points to distinctive grooves in the wrist bones, consistent with plastic zip-tie restraints, and here, her gloved finger traces the hyoid bone. Fracture patterns, suggesting compressive force. This wasn't a drowning or crash victim. She was restrained and strangled. In the trunk, beneath a waterlogged spare tire, technicians discover a strip of electrical tape, its adhesive turned to cloudy jelly by years underwater. Special Agent Martinez photographs it in place before carefully lifting it with forceps. "There's a latent print in the adhesive residue," she notes. "Maybe the water preserved it." The evidence goes to the KBI lab in Topeka, where modern APHIS technology scans the partial print. The database churns through thousands of matches until a name appears on the screen. James Robert Kendrick, fingerprinted in 1985 for his minister's credentials, now employed as a guidance counselor at Lyon County High School. Detective Hawkins pulls up Kendrick's current photo on his laptop. The former music minister's hair has grayed, but his face still radiates the same trustworthy warmth that once comforted grieving parishioners. Just last month, he led a candlelight vigil for missing children. Martinez and Hawkins exchange a weighted look under the tow yard's buzzing lights. The evidence sprawls across folding tables. Between them, the watch, the zip-tied bones, the hymn-wrapped cassette, and now a print tying it all to the man who spent decades helping teenagers process loss while carrying this secret. "The shepherd," Hawkins says quietly, "was actually the wolf." Martinez nods, already mentally composing the warrant application. Around them, moths continue their frantic dance in the artificial daylight, casting shifting shadows across the pale car that has finally surrendered its truth. The investigation moves like a whisper through Emporia in early autumn, each interview carefully orchestrated to avoid drawing attention. Detective Hawkins and Agent Martinez work methodically, piecing together a timeline that should have been clear 34 years ago. At the Conoco station, where the original receipt surfaced, the retired clerk Herman Dobson squints at a photocopied slip through bifocals. "Lord, I remember that night clear as yesterday. She came in for gas right before midnight, always filled up after her shift." His weathered finger taps the timestamp. 11:56, not 11:52 like they wrote down. 4 minutes might not seem like much, but it changes everything. Martinez finishes, watching him nod. The trucker, tracked down through old logbooks, sits in a Missouri diner and describes the bridge scene again. Hazards were blinking. On that little Ford, yeah. But what stuck with me was the other person. Tall figure standing awful close to her door. Didn't seem right, but the rain was coming down so hard by then. He stirs his coffee without drinking it. Been seeing that moment in my dreams since you called. In the sheriff's office, retired Deputy Wilson pulls his reading glasses down his nose as he reviews the corrected timeline. "We assumed she hydroplaned because of the storm. Never thought to check." His voice trails off as 30 years of certainty crumbles. The deacon, now stooped and grey, receives them in his sunroom where African violets crowd the windowsills. "The master key ring? Yes, I remember now. James, Minister Kendrick, said he needed it for emergency outreach during bad weather." He pauses, hands trembling slightly. "Said the Lord's work couldn't wait for locked gates." At the county records office, a clerk named Betty wheels out a dusty banker's box labeled Lyon County Aggregate and Gravel, 1985-1990. Inside, beneath permits and invoices, lies a leather-bound gate log from the quarry. Martinez photographs each page, while Hawkins turns them carefully until, in the family's kitchen, afternoon light slants through worn curtains as the mother listens to Martinez explain how the pieces finally align. Her hand drifts to a small ceramic dish by the phone, touching the spare keys she's kept all these years like talismans. "The gate was never locked that night," Martinez says gently. "He had access. He had a plan." The mother's fingers close around the keys, anchoring herself to their familiar shape. Outside, cicadas thrum in the maple trees she planted after the disappearance, their shadows now long across the yard. The porch light clicks on automatically. She never disconnected the timer. In the incident room, maps and timelines paper the walls. Martinez studies the minister's current photo, his silver hair, his counselor's practiced smile, while Hawkins coordinates with tactical units. They'll move at dawn, quick and quiet before the school day starts, before rumors can ripple through church circles and Facebook groups, because they know what comes next will split this town like lightning, between those who've trusted him for decades and those who always felt something wrong beneath his helpful surface, between faith and terrible truth. The mother's keys gleam in the dish as night settles over Emporia. Tomorrow they'll need to be careful. Tomorrow, everything changes. Dawn bleeds pink across Emporia's eastern edge as unmarked Crown Victorias and plain SUVs take position along Cedar Street. Through tinted windows, detectives watch Minister James Kendrick, now Principal Counselor Kendrick, tend his immaculate front garden. He moves with practiced efficiency, polo shirt crisp despite the early hour, watering can tilting precisely over purple-pink petunias. Detective Hawkins adjusts his earpiece. Subject is in the front yard. All units hold position. The minister's sprinkler system clicks to life, misting the Kentucky bluegrass he's maintained for 20 years. Water beads on, leaves like tears while 4 deputies approach on foot, warrant folder held visible. Kendrick straightens at their footsteps, theatrical surprise crossing his features as he sets down the watering can with careful deliberation. "Gentlemen?" His palms rise slowly, professionally calm. "What brings the sheriff's office out so early?" Martinez presents the warrant while deputies flank the garden path. "We need you to come with us, sir. We have some questions about September 1988. "Of course." Kendrick's smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Though I've already shared everything I remember. Would you mind if I grab a sweater? The station can be chilly." They escort him inside, where the house speaks of meticulous order. Family photos arranged by height, books sorted by color. In his bedroom, while Kendrick selects a cardigan, Detective Chen discovers a locked drawer in his desk. The search. Warrant yields a cache of what Kendrick labeled grief workshop materials, newspaper clippings, vigil programs, and a church bulletin from 1988 with delicate pen marks under her name. At the station, Interview Room 2's fluorescent lights wash Kendrick's face pale as he chuckles softly at the fingerprint evidence. "That must be from when I brought meals to the family," he says, hands folded. "I coordinated the church's support efforts, you see, and the quarry gate key." Martinez slides the logbook entry across the table. Kendrick's expression remains pleasant, unbothered. "I helped wherever needed during that difficult time. But specific keys? I don't recall." When Hawkins produces the corrected gas station receipt, proving the timeline they'd missed decades ago, Kendrick shifts in his chair. "Poor girl probably ran away. It happens more than people think. But it's the evidence bag, containing the electrical tape from the trunk that finally cracks his composure. His pupils contract to pinpoints, hands going still. "I believe I should speak with an attorney now." Across town, Sarah Mitchell, the mother who's waited 34 years for this moment, sits in her parked car behind the Dillon's grocery store. The detective's call came 20 minutes ago. "We're bringing him in. Thought you'd want to know." She watches the station's side entrance, fingers pressed against her lips in prayer or disbelief, as 2 deputies lead Kendrick from an unmarked car. His hands are cuffed behind his back, his cardigan wrinkled, his practiced smile finally gone. The image burns into her memory. The shepherd becoming the wolf, exposed in morning light. "I knew," she whispers to the empty car. "Every Sunday after, every workshop, every time he looked past me instead of at me, I knew." The station doors swing shut behind him, and Sarah Mitchell breathes out 34 years of waiting. Sheriff Ellis adjusts the microphone stand in the county courthouse's media room, his weathered hands steadier than his voice. 24 reporters lean forward, phones recording, as afternoon light stripes the wood-paneled walls. At 6:42 this morning, The Lyon County Sheriff's Office arrested James Andrew Kendrick on charges of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence in connection with the 1988 disappearance of Michelle Larson. The words ripple through Emporia like stones dropped in still water. At the high school where Kendrick counseled teenagers through grief and college applications, students crowd around phones showing his booking photo. In church basements where he once led prayer circles, elderly parishioners clutch each other's hands, whispering, "It can't be," while reaching for old baptism photos tucked in Bibles. But across town, in beauty salons and coffee shops, different conversations surface. Remember how he'd offer rides to the younger volunteers? Did you notice he never let people into his office? There was always something in his smile that didn't fit. The preliminary hearing draws standing room crowds. Dr. Patricia Wong, the state's forensic anthropologist, points to enlarged photographs of skeletal evidence. The fracture pattern on the hyoid bone is consistent with manual strangulation, she testifies, laser pointer circling the delicate butterfly-shaped bone. And these distinct grooves around the wrist bones, they match standard police-grade zip ties applied before water immersion. Defense attorney Marcus Webb rises to cross-examine. Couldn't these injuries occur during a panic response? After an accident, perhaps? The bone damage shows intentional, sustained force, Dr. Wong responds. This was not a momentary action. The courtroom falls silent as FBI audio specialist Timothy Chen approaches the stand with the recovered cassette tape, now restored and digitized. Through courthouse speakers, piano notes emerge crystal clear, a familiar hymn played with technical precision. Then a male voice begins humming along, intimate and close to the microphone. Voice pattern analysis, Chen explains, shows a 98.2% match to Mr. Kendrick's vocal samples from recorded sermons. Outside, thunder rolls across Kansas plains as dark clouds gather. Sarah Mitchell steps to the courthouse microphones, her gray hair dampened by the first drops of rain. Reporters cluster close to hear her steady voice. For 34 years, people said the storm that night made it impossible to know what happened to my daughter. But storms don't hide the truth. They expose who among us helps the vulnerable and who uses the thunder to mask their crimes. Lightning flashes, illuminating the courthouse columns. In the front row, Detective Martinez watches Kendrick's face as the tape plays again. The former minister's expression remains carefully neutral, but his fingers tap against the defense table in perfect time with his younger self's recorded piano. Totes, the town that once unified in grief, now fractures along fault lines of trust. Church members post decades of youth group photos showing Kendrick's hands on young shoulders. Others step forward with stories of counseling sessions that left them uneasy, of rides home that took unexpected detours, of attention that felt both special and suffocating. As rain peppers the courthouse windows, Sarah Mitchell's words hang in the humid air. Storms don't hide the truth. They reveal who we really are. The fluorescent lights of the district attorney's conference room buzz overhead as Detective Martinez spreads photographs across the table. 8 former youth group members, now in their 40s, lean forward to identify themselves in faded church picnic snapshots from 1988. He always knew which girls needed rides, says Amy Weber, touching a photo where she stands, 16 and smiling next to Kendrick at a full festival. The ones with single mums, broken down cars, family troubles, he had a way of making helping seem holy. Martinez slides a map across the table, showing highlighted routes between the church and various homes. Red marks indicate where witnesses remember unusual stops. The first time he said we should pray about my parents' divorce, Weber continues, her finger tracing a back road. Pulled onto a field access, road killed the engine, said private prayer needed privacy. When I got scared, he quoted scripture about trusting spiritual authority. Across town, in a similar room, defense attorney Webb argues motions before Judge Harrison. Your Honor, the Quarrygate records and not analysis are purely circumstantial. This prejudicial evidence serves only to inflame the jury. The judge peers over reading glasses at weather-yellowed ledger pages. The documentation directly establishes access and opportunity counselor. The evidence stands. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Chen reviews radar imaging with Dr. Whitman from the State Archaeological Unit. Blue-tinted screens show subsurface anomalies near the quarry service entrance, rectangular voids in the soil structure, each roughly 6 feet long. The disturbed soil pattern matches the timeline, Whitman explains, adjusting the display. Contrast. Ground hasn't been touched since '88, but something or someone was buried here. 3 days of careful excavation yield only waterlogged wooden planks and rusted metal drums. But the methodical placement suggests practice, preparation, a dress rehearsal for concealment. In the courthouse hallway, Deacon Phillips wrings his hands before testifying. Jim had keys to everything: the fellowship hall, the food pantry, maintenance, gates. During floods, he coordinated emergency response. No one questioned him being anywhere. Sarah Mitchell sits in the back row each day, a spiral notebook open on her lap. She records times with scientific precision. 9:02 a.m. Jury enters 10:17 a.m. Amy Weber testimony begins 2:45 p.m. Radar images shown 4:33 p.m. Court adjourns. Each evening, she places the notebook beside the Tempo's spare keys, maintaining her vigil of documentation while the truth slowly assembles itself from fragments. Another former youth member, Rachel Torres, describes a night in 1987. He insisted on driving me home after choir practice, said the regular route was flooded. We ended up parked behind the old grain elevator. He tested every door lock, explaining how important safety was. When I asked why we weren't moving, he said, "Sometimes we need to sit with our discomfort to grow stronger in faith." The pattern emerges: isolated locations, spiritual manipulation, practiced movements, all the hallmarks of methodical predation hidden behind the mask of Christian charity. In the prosecution's timeline, Michelle Larson's final night becomes not an aberration, but the culmination of years of testing boundaries, perfecting technique, and learning which vulnerabilities to exploit. District Attorney Wilson pins photographs to a foam board: the bridge, turnout, the quarry gate, the recovered car. This wasn't panic, she tells her team. This was procedure. The Lyon County Courthouse's oak-paneled courtroom falls silent as Assistant District Attorney Rachel Martinez approaches the jury box, her heels clicking against worn floorboards. Behind her, an evidence table holds carefully labeled items: the corroded watch, the recovered cassette in its protective sleeve, photographs of the quarry gate. "Let's walk through September 14th, 1988, Martinez begins, her voice steady. Not with speculation, but with evidence. She clicks through a PowerPoint presentation, each slide time-stamped: 11:42 p.m., diner clock-out slip, 11:56 p.m., gas station receipt, corrected time 12:05 a.m., estimated arrival at bridge turnout, based on typical driving time, 12:19 a.m., watch stopped 12:47 a.m., quarry gate entry log. The precision matters, Martinez explains, gesturing to the timeline. This wasn't chaos, this wasn't panic, this was choreography. She lifts a sealed evidence bag containing the recovered electrical tape. The partial print here matches the defendant's right thumb. Not from delivering casseroles, from securing bonds that would hold underwater. Defense Attorney Webb objects. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Harrison warns. Stay with the evidence. Martinez nods and moves to the next. Exhibit: security footage from 2012 showing the Tempo being lifted from quarry waters, algae streaming from its wheel wells. The jury leans forward as the camera pans across the license plate, numbers barely visible through decades of silt. The location wasn't random, Martinez continues. The defendant had access through borrowed keys, knowledge of the terrain, and most importantly, certainty the gate would be logged as locked that night. She plays an enhanced audio clip from the recovered cassette. The piano notes are crisp, followed by a male voice humming. Sound analysis brackets identify probable vocal patterns matching the defendant's testimony samples. This recording wasn't a prank or a coincidence, Martinez says. It was a trophy, preserved in the very vehicle meant to disappear. The defense team shifts uncomfortably as she lifts the final evidence bag, the spare key set, found in the Tempo's ashtray, steel dulled but intact. Michelle Larson carried these keys because she intended to come home, Martinez says, letting them click together softly. The sound rings through the hushed courtroom. She was responsible, reliable. The kind of daughter who kept a spare set just in case. The kind of daughter who called from payphones so her mother wouldn't worry. Several jurors wipe their eyes. In the gallery, Sarah. Mitchell grips her husband's hand as Martinez continues. These keys represent a promise. To return, to be there for her family, to drive her father to doctor's appointments the next morning. A promise stolen by someone who used trust as a weapon and faith as a shield. At 4:03 p.m. the jury files out. Sarah Mitchell watches them go, her notebook open to a fresh page, time logged precisely. The town seems to pause, shops empty early, church bells hold their tongues, and people gather in living rooms to wait for news that could either heal or deepen old wounds. In the silent courtroom, the spare keys rest on the evidence table, their silver edges catching afternoon light through tall windows. A small, ordinary thing made sacred by all it represents. A hush descends over the Lyon County Courthouse as the jury forewoman rises, paper trembling slightly in her hands. Judge Harrison's voice cuts through the tension. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." The clerk receives the folded paper, passes it to the judge. Sarah Mitchell's fingers tighten around the small ceramic dish from her kitchen counter, its familiar weight anchoring her to this moment. The spare keys inside catch the afternoon light filtering through tall windows. On the count of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. A soft intake of breath ripples through the gallery. On the count of aggravated battery, guilty. The minister sits motionless at the defense table, his pressed shirt still crisp, his posture unchanged. On the count of tampering with evidence, guilty. Sarah's younger children, no longer children, press closer to her shoulders. On the count of murder, in the second degree, the forewoman's voice steadies. We find the defendant guilty. The word lands like a stone in still water. Sarah exhales, a breath held since 1988 finally released. Her daughter's spare keys chime softly against the ceramic dish as her hands shake with relief. Across the aisle, church members who testified for the defense bow their heads, some crying quietly. The minister's eyes drift to the upright piano in the corner, used just yesterday for amazing grace between sessions. His face shows no remorse, no crack in the careful mask, only the stillness of a predator whose hunting grounds have finally been fenced off. Judge Harrison sets sentencing for 30 days out, leaving room for appeals and motions. The bailiff steps forward with handcuffs that click shut around wrists once raised in blessing, over baptismal fonts and communion cups. Questions still hang in the air like autumn leaves, the exact sequence at the bridge turnout. The words used to lure her from safety, how long she lived after 1219. But now there's a grave that can bear both dates, a stone where the porch light's vigil can become a proper flame. As deputies lead the defendant away, Sarah notices his shoes scuff slightly on the courtroom floor, the first imperfect movement she's seen from him in 25 years. Outside, reporters cluster on the courthouse steps, microphones thrust forward like spears. Sarah clutches the dish closer, letting her children guide her through the crowd to their waiting car. The September sun is setting as she drives alone to the Neosho River Bridge, pulling onto the same gravel turnout where the payphone once stood. She kills the engine and sits in gathering dusk, listening to crickets tune up in the tall grass. The river moves below, its surface painted copper and rose by the fading light. Wind rustles through late summer cottonwoods. Sarah rolls down her window, feels the evening air on her face. The spare keys catch one last gleam of sunset in their ceramic nest. Into the soft darkness gathering between water and sky, she whispers words held back for decades. I kept the light, you kept your name.